This is a silly commentary video on only 3 parts in the movie John Wick, whichever one it is. Honestly, at this point, it doesn't matter. There'll be a video link below that ends in ZMO, and at the 29-second mark, you hear them state something about a 2011 Combat Master. This is vaguely a reference to the 1911 handgun of old. This was a renamed Taran Tactical Innovations STI Combat Master. So the Combat Master part's correct. In fact, it may actually be a 2000 era or 2011 design. Chambered in something they're calling 9mm Major. It's only referred to as 9 Major because it's not 9mm. It's a case and bullet and chambering that matches 9mm, but it's a wildcat load from 9mm Luger, which is what 9mm refers to, intended only for extremely overpressure guns. They're overbuilt, overdesigned, very expensive. They have to handle a ridiculous amount of recoil. Now, why would they do that? Well, first of all, there are competitions where people use something called a race gun. IPSC and USPSA practical shooting competitions reward you for using a gun that's harder to keep on target due to perceived or measured, in this case, power factor. They use an equation for it, but basically above a certain amount, it has enough recoil that it forces you to not just reset your sights, but it might actually disrupt your ability to shoot. This rewards you for the handicap of using a gun that does not want to stay on target. You can still use compensators and that sort of thing in most cases to keep it from jumping too much. But the point is, if it's above a power factor of 165 or some other arbitrary number that they came up with, or not so arbitrary, then you are classed in major category and you get extra points for being able to put up with the gun basically being unfireable. You lose points if you do things to compensate for it, depending on the competition, I guess. But it's mostly about the recoil or barrel flip or impulse pushing back on you, messing with your ability to stay on target. Only guns specifically built to handle extreme high pressures are allowed to do that design. I could build one, but it would bulge the chamber, which is unusual. SAAMI specifications have certain PSI limits. This is equivalent to me making a shotgun out of ridiculously over-designed material, like the barrel from a Vulcan cannon, or like what the Russians did. They took a cannon barrel, a barrel for firing projectiles through a ship's side, because they were decommissioning them, and they just turned them into shotguns. Fully rifled barrel if you want to. Now, what is an example of this? Now, right off the bat, you can just look up on the Wikipedia article, finding the specs they quote, which may not be the same recoil factor. Now, at the 40-second mark, they mention 125 grains and 1,425 feet per second. This works out to 560 some odd foot-pounds. Now that matches several other things, but I'm going to bring up the 9mm listing and the 9mm article on Wikipedia. This one only shows a little under 500 foot-pounds, so it would barely qualify. The only thing close to it is 124 grains at 1,345 feet per second. That's one of the upper level ones. But one with more foot-pounds right below it, and actually in the same range, doesn't have anything even close to it. It has a much lighter bullet going faster. The speed is what gives you the effect on target and also flattens out your trajectory. But if you just want recoil, that's what this is about. And I want to point out that, well, yes, you can make a 12 gauge do this, and we'll be getting to that in a minute. Now, this also matches, if you're not aware of it, 125 grain, 1,425 feet per second, blah, 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 matches 10mm auto cases that were necked down in 1994 and beyond to make something called the 357 Sig Sauer cartridge. It's a 9mm by 22, caused by necking down 10mm auto to 9mm size and just jamming a 9mm bullet in it. You can just buy a gun like that. It has exactly the same performance capabilities. So what's so special about it? Not a dang thing. Combat Master is just a cool looking gun, or by some people's estimates, and 9mm Major, which is the major characteristic, which has nothing to do with the Sig Sauer cartridge here, is just an overpressure round. Barely at SAAMI specs, similar type, is only going to go about 100 feet per second slower. That's a loss, but at least it probably won't blow up your gun. And even that stuff, when you look up Norma ENVY Full Metal Jacket 9mm major cartridges, they're not listed as major, but they should be. It says on the page for them, please only use in a race gun grade barrel. Can you change the barrel in your gun and do this? Yeah. Will it blow up? Probably, because the rest of the gun isn't rated that much. However, loading a high point with a 9mm major, which is a real cartridge, it's just, I mean, I'd film it, I'd just be many, many feet away. And then we get to the 1 minute and 34 second mark, and they talk about 12 gauge steel slugs. Now, this has been around a long time, and it's not magic. But they show a 2 3/4 cartridge. It's probably, I mean, it's based on what it looks like when it's fired, so the crimp at the top, you know. But anyway, it has an exposed round nose on top. Now, doing really rough estimates, what it looks like is they threw a 8 gram nitrous oxide cartridge bottom into it to make a fake round. Everybody who's seen a nitrous oxide cartridge and held up an empty cartridge for a shotgun shell has thought of doing the same thing to make some sort of fantasy round for a video game. In fact, video games that show, you know, ultra large scale, basically bullets, basically a gigantic upscale cartridge like that, they just model it, you know, and scan it using a nitrous oxide container or just a round ball. So the steel slug they're showing, they don't show it in the air, they don't show it in firing, but it looks like someone just poured molten lead into an 8 gram nitrous oxide container bottom where they cut off to where there's as much of it as possible so you can jam it all the way into the cartridge. It makes it balance really easily. You can load and unload them as dummy rounds, and I recommend them as dummy rounds. You can also make it deliberately short and make ridiculously scary yet tiny mini slug looking things. Also, you can use this for mold to make them. I just thought it was funny that they were bringing up the steel slug. Now, making a steel slug can also be done by, since you want it nose heavy, obviously the hollowed out cartridge, and using the cartridge itself as the flared out gas tight seal at the bottom for containing it. So what you would do is you build your nitrous oxide container up to a certain weight and then make it have enough volume in the base of it to handle the propellant. You know, basically making a 73 caliber Manet ball that's steel jacketed. Now, are any of these magical? If you actually were firing 9mm major out of a pistol using competition grade race gun, which, okay, we can just decide that the Taran Tactical Innovations STI Combat Master in 9mm was converted just to a race gun by just building everything out of, you know, unobtainium. It can actually be done. I just don't know that it would work very well in the 9mm auto loader. But yeah, the cartridges exist and they're more expensive. You can also just make them. People do that by accident and blow up their guns sometimes. That's why you're told to follow the instructions. Now, I'm not going to list how to reload ammunition to 9mm major. Okay, now, for the cosplayers, this is what it's for. You basically buy a toy gun that looks a lot like it, painted up to look like it, and get one that has the removable magazine. Now, what's funny is, if you look at the magazine for some of the plastic toy guns out there that are made to look like a 1911, just get a 1911 toy knockoff. They're actually slightly oversized, so it's perfect. So repaint it, you know, strip the surface of it, make it to where it'll take the paint. And then for your 9mm major, basically just buy a single or acquire a single 9mm round because they look deceptively, innocently safe. And by the way, anybody out there that has a friend and you want to play a joke on them, don't do that. That would really actually hurt them, and it'll destroy the gun probably. It's supposed to blow up a gun if you did that. So, but anyway, for the toy one, you just get a hold of dummy rounds or buy a bag of dummy rounds. They're usually cheaper. Not always. Sometimes they're more expensive than the bullets. And just use that as a mold to make a bunch of hard plastic ones and jam it into the same magazine. And if it doesn't fit, just, you know, alter it enough, stretch it out, make it look really, really long, a really big 9mm. And if you want to do a cosplay John Wick, which is what we're talking about here, first of all, good luck with that. On the 12 gauge, you can get a toy gun that'll do the job and chamber shells, and maybe it's the big Nerf, the really big Nerf that most people don't know about. You have to be in crowd. does look like it's about the same size as the shells. So you can just paint them up to look like the shells. And if you want to make your own dummy rounds that look like the steel slugs from John Wick and all that, you can use various thinners to clean off the outside of shells that you find at some shooting range, and just stick, either make a mold of the bottom of a nitrous oxide container, capsule, and make plastic ones, which is what I'd recommend, or go ahead and just shove them in there if you want to. And just make sure you put a dummy primer in. Make it really obvious, bright orange plastic filler thing, so that nobody will assume that it really fires. And you can use that for your cosplay stuff. Now, why did I do this video? I was trying to figure out what they were talking about. I remember for somewhere, major versus minor. Oh yeah, it's competition rating. It's basically handicapping, like I said. So for those of you who don't know, I'm going to have just the Wikipedia links and YouTube links, because YouTube doesn't seem to flag people for using those links these days. They're on a link flagging fest for the last few months, so I'm trying to find ways to evade this by obeying their rules. Apparently that's some sort of loophole argument. But anyway, other than that, opinion. Yes, there are race guns that operate almost exactly like this. If there aren't, there will be by the time the video's up. I'm pretty sure they exist. In fact, I'm absolutely sure. Is this an advantage? You can look at penetration and impact and dump of energy on impact videos all day long. Ballistic gel versus 9mm, blah, blah, blah. The main reason he's using this in the scene is to get through body armor, which means what you'd want to use is he's actually using full metal jackets if he's smart to get through armor. And they would just have a steel core or a steel front hat, I think it's called. There is a type of cartridge like that that used what looked like a conventional 9mm. There's also one that used a rifle that did the same thing. And it was for getting through hardcore body armor. But I don't see much reason for it, because it's demonstrated in the scene, plot hole, that the face plates don't do any good. You could just aim for the head. But anyway, as for the basically steel jacket of 12 gauges, yeah, that totally would do it. And you can see dozens of YouTubers do the same idea. Again, it's nitrous oxide cartridge bottoms work as a steel jacket. There's even a couple of videos where someone goes to the trouble of remilling the inside with a properly built mill to make it really thin jacketed, so it'll still do the job. But other people just put in a steel ball bearing and fire it. Goes through almost anything at short range, like 10 feet. And dozens of videos. For self-defense, let's just get this done. No, don't use a race gun ammunition or whatever. Just use the faster-moving, ultralight cartridges to go through 50 people if that's what you want to do, or just want to be impressive. But what everyone uses is what works, which is hollow point 9mm coming out of a gun at moderate speed that stop in the target and don't go any further. And if they hit a hard object, they splatter and don't hurt anybody. The idea is, if you're doing self-defense, you're supposed to not become an offensive individual that needs to be taken out by the police. So anyway, the scene was interesting. It only went on for 1 minute and 34, in my opinion, is the part that I was paying attention to. And looking up how they did this on set, a little bit difficult. This is what I suspect was done. But the rest of it's just a conventional dummy round loaded 9mm. They just got a Taran tactical to make it look cool, or make it look interesting. And again, you can cosplay this all you want to. It's pretty easy. In fact, much cheaper. I would recommend doing it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good